There are few places in the United States with the reputation for beauty that Orange County, California has. With its gorgeous beaches, homes, and people, it is often considered one of the nicest places in the entire country to live. One person who called this city home was 23-year-old Julie Kibuishi, a student at Orange Coast College with a passion for dancing and fashion design. Julie was adored by everyone who knew her. She was very outgoing and fun with a magnetic personality that attracted people to her. One such person was 26-year-old Army veteran Sam Hare. Sam was a private first class in the U.S. Army 173rd Airborne, who served in Afghanistan. He was known for his love of travel and also his extreme frugality, which his friends would often poke fun at him for, calling him a cheapskate. Sam's spending habits, or lack thereof, had paid off for him, however. When he left the military, he had amassed a handsome savings of over $60,000. His plan was to go to college, then re-enlist back into the Army and try to become an officer. He moved back home to Southern California and enrolled in Orange Coast College, where he met Julie. The two quickly became good friends, with Julie helping Sam on schoolwork by tutoring him in anthropology. Whether or not their relationship had become romantic seems to be somewhat up in the air. Some friends said they believed it was, but others, including Sam's father, stated it was more of a brother and sister type relationship. Regardless, the fact of the matter is the two had become very close, and on May 22, 2010, the nature of their relationship would be cast into the public spotlight. The night before, Julie had gone out to dinner with friends in Long Beach, but afterwards had mysteriously disappeared. When her mother June couldn't get a hold of her the following morning, she became concerned and started calling around to Julie's friends. It was very unlike her to just up and disappear without speaking to anyone. And when her friends also couldn't get a response from her, everyone became extremely worried. Similarly, Sam was also missing. His parents were expecting him over for a weekend get-together, to which Sam hadn't shown up. When they tried calling him, his phone went straight to voicemail, something they found very odd, as Sam was not known to ever turn off his phone, and was adamant about answering calls from his mom and dad. Sam's father, Steve, decided to take a drive over to his son's apartment to see what was going on. He arrived at the Camden Martinique apartment complex and entered his son's home, where in the back bedroom he made a gruesome discovery.
Okay, what's going on, sir?
There's a body in my son's apartment.
There's a what?
A body, a dead body.
A dead body? Are you sure, sir?
I can think he's cold, man, I'm sure.
Okay.
He's cold.
Okay, hold on just a minute. Is it someone that you know, sir?
I have no idea who she is. God, I don't know what's going on.
Does your son know who it is?
He's not here. Jesus, honey.
Okay. Do you know where your son is?
No, I don't. I don't. His phone's off.
Okay. Just keep breathing for me, sir, okay? Where in the apartment is she?
She's in the bedroom. She's there's been some sexual activity. She's dead. There's blood from her head. I trust you just to see if she was cold.
There was blood from her head?
Yeah, honey, I don't know what to say.
Okay, just stay in there, okay?
I fear Jesus.
The woman was Julie Kibuishi. She was slumped over on Sam's bed with multiple gunshot wounds to the back of her head. Her pants had been partially cut off, and a message was written on her back which read, "All yours, you." Sam was nowhere to be found. Police arrived on scene and immediately began searching for evidence. Going through Julie's cell phone provided some revealing information. Sam had texted her several messages earlier that evening, saying he was going through some family issues and wanted her to come by and spend time with him. Also, when detectives looked into Sam's background, they found some worrying accusations. In 2002, at the age of 19, he was arrested and along with 14 others was charged with murder after allegedly taking part in a gangland-style killing of another 19-year-old named Byron Benito. He pleaded not guilty and was eventually acquitted in 2004 after going to trial. Additionally, it was believed that, like many veterans who returned from the Middle East, Sam was suffering from PTSD. He had been involved in heavy fighting during his time in Afghanistan, and according to several friends, had confessed to them he was having recurring nightmares. This seemed like a pretty open and shut case to Costa Mesa detectives. Sam, who had accusations of violent crime in his past, possessed knowledge of how to use a firearm, and was apparently not in the best of shape mentally, lured Miss Kibuishi over to his apartment where something made him snap, causing him to sexually assault and murder the young woman who'd been his close friend. One group that was not buying this theory, however, was Mr. Hare's friends and family. For starters, while he had been charged in a gruesome killing 8 years prior, he was acquitted in a court of law. Sam's parents stated that after that incident, he'd turned his life around and had stopped running with the group of friends he'd gotten into trouble with. His record since then was spotless, and those who'd served alongside him in the military were adamant that he'd been nothing short of a model citizen throughout his time serving. Above all, anyone who knew about Sam and Julie's relationship emphatically rejected the notion that he'd hurt her in any way. Furthermore, the idea that Mr. Hare was having family problems was entirely untrue according to his parents, as they had a very close relationship with their son. They insisted that despite how damning things may have looked, there had to be some sort of explanation. In the eyes of law enforcement, though, Sam was the primary suspect, and the defense of his character by his friends and family meant very little, as rarely will those close to someone believe they are capable of cold-blooded murder. A manhunt was now on to find Sam Hare. Police were searching frantically for a military veteran they believed had murdered his classmate and close friend. Looking into Sam's bank account, they discovered that his credit card had been used recently. Twice to withdraw money from a Chase Bank ATM in Long Beach, and for the purchase of a pizza from a restaurant not far from the ATMs. Police were ecstatic, believing Sam had become sloppy and made a mistake. When they obtained security camera footage from the ATM, though, they were surprised to see a skinny young man who bore no resemblance to the muscular combat veteran they were searching for. Not too long after, police got a lucky break when another order was placed at the pizza shop from Sam's credit card. They quickly made their way to the house where the delivery had been made, believing it was a friend's house that Mr. Hare was hiding out in. Descending on the house, they were greeted at the door by a terrified 17-year-old named Wesley Freilich, who seemed completely bewildered by the police response. Searching the house thoroughly, they found no trace of Sam, but did find his Chase credit card, and when they took the scared teenager into custody, he provided them with some revealing information. Wesley fully admitted he'd been the one to order the pizza and take the money from the ATM. However, he claimed the credit card had been provided to him by a 26-year-old local theater actor named Daniel Wozniak. Daniel was well known among those who frequented the local community theaters, as he'd been performing in them for several years. Mr. Freilich said that he'd met Daniel when he was in middle school, as he often hung around the theater due to his mother's job as a drama teacher. He thought very highly of Mr. Wozniak, calling him a fun person to be around and a good friend. So when Daniel approached him with a credit card in Sam Hare's name and asked him to make a withdrawal from it, the naive teenager saw no reason not to trust him. Daniel's explanation was he'd taken a job as a bail bondsman and that Mr. Hare owed him money. Why he needed the help of a 17-year-old to do this was never explained, But again, this was someone Wesley very much trusted, and it seems as though that trust overruled his common sense in this case. Police soon discovered that Mr. Wozniak was engaged to a local actress by the name of Rachel Buffett, whose prior jobs included a stint at Disneyland playing Ariel and Alice. More importantly, though, they also found out that Daniel and Sam were neighbors, and a glance through the text messages Mr. Hare had sent to Miss Kibuishi revealed that Sam had indicated to her earlier that day he was going to be helping Daniel out with something. Needless to say, detectives now very much wanted to speak with Mr. Wozniak. They called his cell phone and asked him to come in and talk to them, which he declined to do because he was getting married in 2 days and his bachelor party was that evening. Officers decided to make it clear to Mr. Wozniak this wasn't a request, and showed up at his bachelor party that evening to bring him in for questioning. At the time Daniel was brought in, detectives still believed that Sam was their primary suspect, and were hoping that Mr. Wozniak could shed some light on his whereabouts. The more Daniel talked, however, the more suspicious of him police became. Initially, when confronted with Mr. Freilich's testimony, Daniel explained that he'd been recruited by Mr. Hare to take part in a credit card fraud scheme. The plan was that Sam would give Mr. Wozniak his ATM card, and then Daniel would slowly withdraw money off of it to give to Sam, who would then report his credit card stolen to Chase, who would theoretically compensate the losses, essentially doubling his money. Mr. Wozniak explained that in exchange for taking part in this, he would be given a cut of the money, which he desperately needed as he was in tremendous amounts of debt and on the verge of eviction with a wedding just around the corner. He claimed to have no knowledge of Miss Kibuishi's murder, and stated the last time he saw Sam was at his apartment where he'd gotten into a car with a man in a black hat and drove off. Investigators did not believe him. As far as they saw it, Daniel knew more about Sam's whereabouts than he was letting on, and with the information available to them at the time, they had more than enough evidence to book him for accessory after the fact. After doing so, they continued to press Mr. Wozniak for more information, and as the interrogation wore on, his behavior became more erratic, along with his story. Daniel now told officers that the man with the black hat was a lie, and that he'd been the one to drive Sam to a remote location. He also now claimed that during the drive, Mr. Hare had confessed to him he'd murdered Miss Kibuishi, and had threatened Daniel with death if he didn't maintain his silence. Mr. Wozniak told officers that he was not involved with Julie's death whatsoever, and that he had no idea where Sam was now. Again though, officers did not believe him. At this point, they did not suspect he was involved in the murder, but they did believe that he knew where Sam was and was withholding that information from them. As investigators continued their interrogation into the early hours of the morning, Mr. Wozniak made a critical mistake. After hours of stating he'd not been involved with the murder in any capacity, nor had he seen Julie's body, Daniel's story changed once again. This time he said he'd gone into Sam's apartment, where he saw Miss Kibuishi lying on the bed. When asked to describe what he'd seen, however, Mr. Wozniak clearly stated he saw, quote, 2 gunshots. This would change the complexion of the case entirely. When someone is shot in their head, the surface level tissue damage is so severe that it's impossible to tell at a glance how many bullet holes there are. The only way Daniel could have known exactly how many times Julie was shot was if he'd been in the apartment at the time she was killed. Detectives were now starting to suspect Mr. Wozniak's involvement went much further than he was letting on. Officers decided to allow his fiancée, Rachel Buffett, to come into the interrogation room and speak with Daniel, hoping that her presence would encourage Mr. Wozniak to come clean with everything else he knew. However, they immediately noticed Miss Buffett's demeanor did not match that of a bride-to-be who just found out her wedding was going to be canceled because her fiancé was involved in a murder. Instead, Rachel came off as very cold and indifferent to the events going on. And according to detectives who were in the room with them, it seemed as though the couple was putting on an act together. This now turned police's suspicion to both Mr. Wozniak and his fiancée. After Rachel left, officers wanted time to discuss their next course of action. Daniel was taken back to a holding cell where later that morning he placed a phone call to his fiancée. During that call, Rachel mentioned that Daniel's brother Tim had spoken to her about a book bag that Mr. Wozniak had asked him to dispose of. Daniel became despondent upon hearing this, begging Miss Buffett not to mention this to the police, as doing so would mean he was, quote, a dead man. Rachel flatly stated to her fiancé that she had no intention of hiding this information from police, and with no options left, Daniel decided he was going to come clean with investigators. Mr. Wozniak was brought back into an interrogation room by detectives, where he finally told them the truth. Daniel had stolen a gun from his father's home and used it to kill Sam Hare after luring him to the attic of a local theater. Later that evening, he texted Julie Kibuishi off of Sam's phone and murdered her as well. After committing both grisly murders, he again took to the stage and performed in a production of the musical Nine with his fiancée Rachel. He returned to Sam's body the next day and began the grisly process of dismembering the former combat veteran, disposing of Mr. Hare's body parts in a local park. Lastly, he packed the murder weapon, the tools used in the dismemberment, Sam's bloody clothes, and several other pieces of evidence inside of a backpack and dropped it off to his brother Tim and told him to get rid of it. His motivation for this horrific act? Money. As mentioned earlier, Mr. Wozniak was in a tremendous amount of debt. He didn't have a job and was in danger of being evicted from his apartment. Additionally, he was also unsure of how he'd pay for the lavish wedding and honeymoon that he and Rachel had planned. When he realized his neighbor and friend Sam had over $60,000 in a savings account, he planned to murder him and steal it. Julie Kibuishi was killed by Daniel so he could frame Sam for the crime and send police on a wild goose chase. If you think this plan sounds completely idiotic, that's because it is. Any person with a shred of common sense could see this had absolutely no chance of working. There's no way that Mr. Wozniak would have been able to withdraw over $60,000 from Mr. Hare's account in $400 increments without the bank or police officers eventually noticing. However, Daniel was a textbook narcissist who truly believed his acting ability was so great that he could fool seasoned homicide investigators with this elaborate ruse. After his confession, Mr. Wozniak led officers to Mr. Hare's remains, or what was left of them. Police scoured the park thoroughly, eventually recovering all of Sam's body, with the exception of one of his hands. In a horrifically ironic twist of fate, Sam's head was recovered on what would have been his 27th birthday. Police also went to the home of Daniel's brother Tim, uncovering the backpack with the literal treasure trove of evidence it contained, and arresting Tim for being an accessory after the fact. He quickly agreed to flip on his brother in return for a reduced sentence. Additionally, more evidence was uncovered on Daniel's home computer, which revealed he had Googled such questions as how to hide a body and quick ways to kill someone. Stunningly, even after a taped confession and mountains of physical evidence against him, Mr. Wozniak pled not guilty and would go into his trial with the argument that his fiancée Rachel had been the mastermind behind the entire series of events. Now, while police didn't necessarily believe Miss Buffett was the brains behind the murders, they certainly believed she knew more than she had let on and had proof she'd lied to them multiple times during her interviews. Most notably, she'd initially supported Daniel's claim that Sam was with a man in a black hat, stating to police that she'd seen him herself. However, it was later revealed by a witness who'd been at the couple's apartment that day, Both him and Rachel saw Daniel and Sam leave together, with Daniel returning by himself several hours later, seemingly on the verge of a nervous breakdown. When Mr. Wozniak later revealed during his interrogation the man in the black hat had been completely made up, officers were understandably curious as to why Miss Buffett had supported the story. In 2012, she was also arrested and charged with being an accessory after the fact, as well as obstruction of justice. She publicly maintained her innocence, most notably in an appearance on the Dr. Phil show where she was confronted by Sam's father. She eventually went on trial in 2018, where she was convicted of 2 felony counts and sentenced to 32 months in prison. The actual extent of her involvement in the crime remains hotly contested. Rachel's family and friends argue she was manipulated by Daniel, and point to her phone conversation with him in jail as proof she wanted the crime solved as bad as anyone. Prosecutors and the families of Mr. Hare and Miss Kibuishi believed this was more or less an act to try and save herself, as Rachel even acknowledged while talking to Daniel she knew the line was being recorded. Regardless, it seems pretty clear that at the very least she had lied to police and withheld information in an attempt to protect Daniel. Tim, Mr. Wozniak's brother, ended up testifying against him and pleaded guilty to being an accessory after the fact. Due to his deal with prosecutors, he was only given 4 years of probation, but seems to have continued to find himself in legal trouble ever since. As far as Daniel himself is concerned, the process of him finally having his day in court took much longer than usual. His attorney essentially tried to slow walk the process and filed several petitions in court alleging misconduct by the arresting officers and the prosecution. Each of these petitions had to be argued before a judge, which dragged the process out much to the agitation of the victims' families, and even the presiding judge eventually. Daniel would use this time to lap up as much of the spotlight as he could, giving several interviews from prison and being featured on the television program Lockdown, an appearance that particularly drew the ire of Sam and Julie's families, as they felt the television show had intentionally tried to paint Mr. Wozniak in a very positive light. Finally, after a seemingly endless cycle of hearings and arguments, Daniel Wozniak stood trial for the murders of Sam Hare and Julie Kibuishi in 2016. His lawyers really didn't offer much in the way of a defense, simply arguing that while Daniel may have pulled the trigger, Rachel was the one who had conceived the idea for the murders. He also again argued that misconduct had taken place by the Costa Mesa Police Department, without really presenting any evidence to support this claim. By contrast, the prosecution presented over 23 witnesses, a literal mountain of physical evidence, and a taped confession by Mr. Wozniak. The trial lasted for 5 days, and it took the jury barely 1 hour to deliberate before finding Daniel Wozniak guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, Daniel's lawyers once again tried to shift blame to Miss Buffett, which worked out about as well as it had during the trial. Even worse for Mr. Wozniak was the fact that no one came forward to support him as a character witness, not even his own parents. Comparatively, Sam and Julie's friends and family were practically flooding the courtroom, and one by one took to the stand to explain how much both of them were loved and how much they'd be missed. Once again, the jury handed down a swift decision, and Mr. Wozniak was sentenced to death. Daniel sat on California's death row for the next 3 years, but in May of 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order placing a moratorium on all executions in California. Now, I'm not going to open the often very politically charged can of worms that is arguing the morality of the death penalty. I'll let you guys fight that out in the comments section. What I can tell you is Miss Kibuishi and Mr. Hare's families were not happy with the decision, and made their displeasure known at a victims' rally in Orange County, where they were supported by the lead prosecutor, Matt Murphy, as well as several other officials from Orange County. Whether Daniel Wozniak will eventually find himself strapped to a lethal injection table or not, he most certainly will never see the outside world again, which, according to those who were most affected by the crimes he committed, is much better than he deserves. If you are interested in true crime, criminal justice history, and mysterious stories from around the world, consider subscribing. We post new videos every other week, so be sure to also click on that notification bell so you can be updated the second a new video is posted. This is Crime Spot, and thank you for watching.